Hello there, so circle. Click. Clicking emphasizes an exact point in a song, and rhythm is based around clicking a song's most important sounds. Slider. Click, hold, release. Clicking still emphasizes an exact point in a song, but holding and releasing usually don't. They can express parts of a song, but not with nearly the same amount of importance as clicking. Modders often give advice saying, start sliders on strong sounds and end them on sounds of equal or relatively less strength, which is helpful if you're new to mapping, but rhythm goes deeper than just that. So music normally has more than one instrument playing at a time. However, there's usually only one instrument that clearly stands out above the others. It's the most rhythmically dynamic, and it's what you'd recognize a song by. That is the most prominent rhythm in the song. That's the most prominent rhythm. Even if you don't have a very musical background, you should be able to figure out what's the most important part of the song anyway. Because this one instrument stands out in the song more than others, you'll want to prioritize it with your rhythm choice. Of course, there are other instruments playing sounds, but those can be mapped while still prioritizing the main instrument. In this case, the singer is the main instrument, so every circle is emphasizing a vocal syllable. If you listen closely between these gaps though, there is a really quiet sound going on every red tick. These gaps could be replaced by sliders and follow the singer appropriately, since releasing a slider doesn't have nearly the same impact as clicking on it. Both rhythm choices are actually acceptable. I wanna always be with you. That's the most important part of the song here. But percussion has sounds on the white ticks, while most vocals start on the red ticks. This contradiction of instruments makes rhythm choice a bit harder than that last map. Using sliders that start on each vocal and end on each percussion sound works great to cover every instrument in the song, while still prioritizing just the vocals. So this is good rhythm choice. Can you actually tell what this rhythm is prioritizing? I really can't. Objects 1, 2, and 7 ignore vocals, while 3 and 4 prioritize them. The circles are kind of just following either one or both, I don't know. The rhythm choice here is not very good. That isn't to say that the rhythm on the previous map is the only good way to do this part of the song though. A lot of rhythm variety comes from using multiple acceptable ways of prioritizing an instrument. This prioritizes vocals, yet at the same time allows you to click on a few percussion sounds on downbeats. Because it's still clear that the vocals are being followed despite incorporation of other instruments, this is acceptable. This is the kind of thing that just doesn't work. Yes, there are sounds on every half a beat, but doing this is not capturing what's important in the song. To do that, you'd be prioritizing one instrument. Of course, prioritizing one instrument can just be 1/2 circle spam, as I showed with that first map. So by now, you understand that clicking is the most important part of rhythm choice. But it's not the only part of it. Sliders still have those hold and release functionalities, remember? So far, the sliders have shown only end on specific beats in the music. Slider ends were covering parts of the song, while still allowing another part to be the focus. Sliders don't necessarily need to have their ends landing on specific sounds though. They can end really close to the next object, usually 1/4 of a beat away, in order to express a held or extended sound. There's one issue I have with these extended sliders though. Often, people map held sounds that contradict other sounds in the music. This right here is an extended slider used in a not so good way, since it passes through a rather noticeable sound on the white tick. The mapper may not be prioritizing that instrument, but ignoring it and placing the slider end on silence afterwards makes it seem like the slider isn't actually following the music. There are times when extended sliders work great, and often better than shorter sliders, but those are only when they don't pass through easily noticeable sounds. So I've been talking a lot about prioritizing only one instrument in the music. What happens when the main instrument becomes unimportant or stops entirely? In most cases, people don't actually put a pause in rhythm. Instead, they prioritize the next most powerful instrument until the main instrument takes over again. In this case, the main instrument is the singer. 1, 2, and 3 each allow clicking on a vocal sound, while slider tails land on other sounds. For the next combo though, the vocal is just one long held note. I could just stick in a really long slider for this whole section, but that isn't really fitting with the intensity of the song. Instead, I chose to map the guitar sounds. It's constant 1/2 noise, plus some sound on 3 in the head of 4 that I don't really know how to describe. This goes against what the vocals are doing, but I believe it's better than just reducing rhythm intensity when the song doesn't actually lose any intensity. There's also times when it seems like the main instrument gets overshadowed by another instrument. In this case, vocals are emphasizing red ticks, while percussion emphasizes white ticks and increases volume around object 4 into 1/4 drums. While I could map the last two vocals using sliders similar to 2 and 3, it wouldn't really show that the other instrument is doing something a lot more cool. I like cool stuff. I mapped the cool stuff. Choosing when it's okay to prioritize different instruments is one of the hardest things to understand about rhythm. Remember, mapping the music, and all of the music, is the end goal of rhythm choice, not just mapping one instrument. Yet, prioritizing one instrument is usually the best way to follow all of the music. You just need to incorporate other parts of the music as well while still being clear about what's the most important. It's really ambiguous, but I have no other way to really put that since every song can be something different. The last thing I want to talk about is intensity. Remember how in the spacing emphasis video I talked about how certain parts of the song have relatively more or less intensity than others? In order to make that clearer through mapping, people often use less object density on the less intense parts and more object density on the more intense parts. For example, listen to this part here and pay attention to how many objects there are. Okay, now listen to this part. Even if the music has a lot of noticeable sounds, it can be more appropriate not to map all of them to show that it's less intense. Also, keep in mind that all this stuff I'm talking about with intensity is relative to other parts of the song and map. So like, if I were making a really low difficulty, I'm already ignoring lots of sounds, but in a calm section, I'd be ignoring even more than usual to express that it's less intense. So like, listen to this. It's ignoring a lot of sounds, yeah, but then listen to this. There's even less objects than before because it's less intense. Anyway, if you're having a hard time with rhythm, analyzing any recently ranked map should tell you what's good and what's not. For most people, rhythm is a lot easier to understand than other aspects of mapping, so you should be okay.